Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is under arrest. He's facing charges of crimes against humanity for his war on drugs. The International Criminal Court says thousands were killed under his watch. So how will this play out domestically? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. The former president of the Philippines is set to stand trial for crimes against humanity in The Hague. Rodrigo Duterte has been linked to thousands of extrajudicial killings during his controversial war on drugs. It's a win for the International Criminal Court, since it's rare for such a high-profile figure to be brought to justice. But domestic politics may have played a role in his arrest. Duterte had made an enemy of the sitting president. So is justice being served, or is international law being weaponised for political gain? And what does this mean for other powerful figures who are wanted by the ICC? We'll get to our panel of guests in a moment, but first this report from Fintan Monaghan.
Once the most powerful man in the Philippines, Rodrigo Duterte is taken away as a prisoner. He was arrested by police after returning from Hong Kong and left Manila on Tuesday. Duterte is set to stand trial at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. In a message recorded before his departure, Duterte said he's being deprived of his legal rights.
So, what is the law and what is the crime that I committed?
During his time in office, Duterte led a controversial war on drugs. The ICC warrant accuses him of crimes against humanity for extrajudicial executions. Police records show more than 6,000 people were killed. Some say the death toll is much higher. His legacy divides the Philippines. His actions were condemned by many, but others support his tough stance on crime.
When he was president, things were peaceful. There was less crime and there was order when he was in power. He did not deserve this treatment.
I think the arrest was the right action for the people who wanted justice for the deaths of their children, to get peace for those who were killed.
Duterte's arrest is a win for the ICC, but there are questions over its jurisdiction. The Philippines withdrew from the court in 2019, but the ICC insists it can still prosecute crimes committed before that date. There are also questions about the role domestic politics played in the arrest.
We did not do this because it was derived from or it came from ICC. We did this because Interpol asked us to do it, and we have commitments to them. And we lived up to those commitments.
An alliance between two political dynasties, the Marcos and the Duterte family, has broken down. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his allies are trying to impeach Duterte's daughter, who is vice president. Marcos' decision to execute the ICC's warrant has allowed him to weaken a political opponent. Duterte has left the country he once ruled, uncertain if he will ever return. A man once thought untouchable will now have to answer the charges against him. Fintan Monaghan, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's bring in our guests to discuss this further. And today in Manila, in the Philippines, we have Kristina Conti, Secretary General of the National Union of People's Lawyers. We're talking about the International Criminal Court today. Well, we have former Chief Prosecutor of the court in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Luis Moreno Ocampo, also joining us on Inside Story. Thank you for joining us on the programme today. Luis, if I can start with you, your reaction to this. I mean, Duterte, the court had been looking at him for a very long time. Was he even on the radar when you were the chief prosecutor?
No. Philippines joined the court after. What is interesting for me is there is a emerging global order system, because Duterte flew to Hong Kong, and then when he was doing immigration, people realized, there is an arrest warrant against him presented by Interpol. So Interpol notified a red notice to Hong Kong authorities to arrest him. Hong Kong authorities sent back to Manila, but then in Manila, he was arrested and sent to the International Criminal Court. So that was a system. It's a police judicial activity, no political interference. And it's working. It's fascinating for me to see that in a world, chaotic world, suddenly there is law and there is order.
Kristina, I'd like to perhaps come back to the Interpol part of this because it may be there is a Philippines reason for this. We'll come to that in a moment. But first, the reaction on the ground there in Manila, because it's almost 3 years after he left office. Duterte remains a polarizing figure, very popular with some, but I guess the one thing people in the country shared, whatever their views, was the shock at seeing this once powerful president under arrest.
Well, I certainly agree. It was a pleasant surprise for us, of course, and infuriating, on the other hand, for his supporters. From on the side of the victims, we have long awaited this warrant of arrest, but the moment it came, of course, it was a different experience altogether to really see Duterte, the most powerful person in the Philippines, and for a time even in Southeast Asia, being taken and arrested by the same people he had earlier commanded. So it was surreal, but at the same time empowering for the victims.
And Kristina, he had, we understand, been planning a political return, trying to go to his old job of mayor of Davao in Mindanao in the south of the Philippines, with elections coming up soon. He'd been in Hong Kong, as we heard. There were rumours of an arrest warrant. Why did he come back, do you think?
Well, I don't know. And people have been debating whoever advised him to do so. He went to Hong Kong to campaign. And there was a campaign activity. There was a kind of a rally or a Thanksgiving activity on Sunday. He had the opportunity to come back on Monday. And there were rumors that he had asked for China's protection, that he had wanted to go to the mainland, that he wanted to remain in Hong Kong, but had been declined. So he had to go back to the Philippines latter part of the week. And so we saw this arrest in the Philippines. And surprisingly, the president, Marcos, who used to be best friends with him, that's what they called each other, and who was the running mate of the president's daughter, or rather Duterte's daughter, pulled through with his promise that he will cooperate with the court. Originally, the stance of the Philippine government had been firm. They will not cooperate the court. They will not recognize the jurisdiction of the court. However, eventually, it eased up. They softened on their stance. Also affected by the so-called breakup of the tandem of Duterte and the younger Marcos.
OK, Luis, I want to ask you about the idea of arresting a world leader, current or former. You were the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Only 3 people have done that job to this point. We know the well-known expression, justice needs to be applied without fear or favour. But is it more difficult when you're dealing with someone who is that high up in the system? And I think it's worth noting to our viewers that you brought indictments against Omar Bashir in Sudan, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. You pursued charges against Uhuru Kenyatta, who later became the president of Kenya, and against William Ruto, who's now the president of Kenya. Worth noting, both cases, those charges were dropped. But when you're dealing with someone at that level, do you have to go through your mind and think a bit more seriously about it than if it's another accused person?
Well, for a prosecutor, it should be the same. You have to collect the evidence. You cannot present charges with no clarity. The biggest problem is arresting. Arresting a head of state is hugely complicated. That's why when you mention the head of state in my time, President Bashir was in position for years, then fell, he was in jail in Sudan, debates to send him to ICC or not. Omar Gaddafi was killed while he was already indicted. President Gbagbo was in jail at The Hague for 9 years and then was acquitted. And President Kenyatta and Ruto were the opposition party, killing each other. And suddenly they took the ICC arrest warrant as a mechanism to face opposition and make a ticket together. And
so what goes through your mind when you're planning an operation like this? I mean, if it's a really big one, I mean, are you thinking, are we ready? Are we actually going to manage to to get this arrest through? And are we ready with the case?
Well, it's interesting your question, because in particular when I was doing Bashir, I had many people saying not to do it, but my duty was to do it. And so I checked the evidence, I checked the law, and I did it. And Karim Khan, the current prosecutor, did the same on Netanyahu and Putin. On Netanyahu, he put an advisory board to check. So what we have to, prosecutor have to check the evidence is clear, the law is clear. Then it's a political problem for the others, not for the prosecutor.
Well, also joining us, another guest today in Manila, Richard Haydarian, who's Senior Lecturer in International Affairs at the University of Philippines and author of The Rise of Duterte, a populist revolt against elite democracy. Richard, thank you for joining us. Tell us exactly what crimes Duterte is accused of.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm sure that our other guests are more competent than me to look at the merits of the case, but I think the case is extremely robust as far as the cases are concerned. We're looking at multiple communications, multiple grassroots efforts. We're talking about, people who are at the heart of the darkness of Duterte's war on drugs, like Mr. Matabato, Mr. Las Cañas, all of them providing this testimony. And we're looking at a very robust multi-year investigation by the ICC, and also in coordination with people who on the ground in the Philippines have been gathering evidence. So I think as far as the solidity or robustness of the evidence is concerned, I think there's no doubt about that. The debate rather in the Philippines right now is whether the circumstances around which Duterte was just automatically whisked away to The Hague, was that something that was legally sound and crystal clear? To be honest about it, I've talked to many legal luminaries in the Philippines who are even critical of Duterte, but feel that perhaps we're talking a little bit of a legal gray zone, or at least we're talking about an unprecedented situation, because I think many were anticipating that, Duterte comes in, there'll be a temporary restraining order, this will be taken to the Supreme Court, Duterte supporters will have rallies and they'll delay this and all and all. But that's not what happened. I think they got completely outsmarted by the Marcos administration, which was prepared to prevent Duterte from coming back to the country and rallying support, and prepared to whisking away as soon as possible to The Hague. I think that was something that came as a shock to a lot of us who have been observing, to be honest, a quite conflict avoidant Marcos administration, which has been very wishy-washy on the status of their cooperation with the ICC, not to mention wishy-washy on the status of the jurisdiction of the ICC, which I think any reasonable legal expert or observer knows that the jurisdiction issue was resolved a long time ago.
Kristina, if you can pick up the crimes that he is accused of. Sorry, Luis, go ahead.
If I make to clarify the point that he made, very important point. Normally, there are extradition trials and should be in Philippines. But with the International Criminal Court, the process is different. That's why Philippine lawyers don't know it very well. The process is called surrender. So with the International Criminal Court, you don't need an extradition trial. The police arrest him and the country surrender him to the ICC. That's it. Very simple, no extradition trials, no national intervention. And now the only authority to decide on the future of Duterte are the judges on the International Criminal Court, no one else. Philippine Supreme Court can do nothing else.
Thank you for clarifying that. Going back to the crimes he's accused of, Kristina, vigilante death squads, summary executions, and what amazes me is the estimates of the number of people killed in these anti-drugs operations. I've seen an low estimate of 6,000. I've seen 12,000. I've seen 30,000. We don't even know the numbers, do we?
Well, we don't. The authority to count these numbers, to take a toll, would be the government itself. And they are well placed to do that. The official government figure now is 7,640 killed in, or the IPO, dead in police operations. And we don't know how much out there died in vigilante killings, or what we call here riding in tandem incidents. These would be motorcycle riding in tandem, and they would just shoot in blatant daylight so brazenly. The charges that have been filed against Duterte, the charge specifically would be crimes against humanity. In the initial request of the prosecutor to open the investigation, it was looking at up to 30,000 people killed. In the request rather in the warrant of arrest, they've trimmed it down a bit and have said that Duterte is being indicted for his role as the founder of the DDS, this is the Davao Death Squad, as the mayor of Davao, and as the president of the Philippines. So this spans 2011 to 2019. And they talk about numbers, 19 persons killed in Davao City by the DDS, and at least 24 persons, allegedly criminals, killed during the time that he was president. So I know that there's a little bit of confusion about the numbers, but in the ICC, really, the numbers don't matter. It's the widespread and systematic killings, the pattern that should matter and will be proven before the court.
And Luis, I mean, he was very public about what he said he was going to do, and then he did it. On the campaign trail, he once said there'd be so many bodies dumped in Manila Bay, the fish would grow fat from feeding on them. I mean, does that make the case more clear-cut?
Well, I don't know the evidence. They know more the evidence than me. So the evidence will be debated in court. So what the ICC will offer Mr. Duterte, something he did not offer to his victims, a fair trial. So all the evidence will be presented before him, and he will have the right to defend himself. That's the process starting now.
Richard, in terms of the ICC, he took a very strong line on the ICC. He said he rallied against the ICC during his presidency, and then in 2019 he pulled out of the ICC. How is that, his background with the ICC, how is that being seen in Manila as people look at this arrest?
Again, let me thank our guests for clarifying the circumstances, the legal circumstances of whisking away Duterte. The reason I mentioned that is because I think that is a narrative that supporters of Duterte are trying to push, that, this whole thing is illegal, that the ICC has no jurisdiction, and that's the kind of narrative they're going to keep on harping on. So it's very important for real experts, for objective experts, to clarify the circumstances of this. As far as the ICC and its jurisdiction is concerned, the Philippines was part of the ICC after ratifying the Rome Statute from 2011 to 2018 at least. So all the crimes that were committed during that time are covered by the ICC. And last time I checked, ICC has also issued warrants of arrest against heads of states of countries that are not even a member of the ICC.
Okay, let me bring in Luis very quickly on that point of the jurisdiction. Luis, is there any grey area here that Duterte's lawyers can argue because he pulled out or not?
No, it was defined by the appeal chamber. The appeal chamber already decided the situation. The Philippines left in 2018. That means it could be investigated until 2019. So before 11 and 19, there is no problem to investigate it. Not after. ICC could not investigate when the state is not a party, and the state party can leave. But while they were parties, they could be investigated. And that situation in Philippines between 2011 and 2019, ICC could investigate Philippine crimes.
Kristina, the current...
Supreme Court,
very quickly, Richard.
If I may add, the Philippine Supreme Court has also ruled on this issue. Last time I checked, the Philippine Supreme Court has also said that there's at least residual jurisdiction by the ICC for the years that the Philippines has accession to the Rome Statute. So I think if you look at it from multiple angles, the issue of jurisdiction has been resolved a long time ago. The problem is that
let me bring in Kristina now, if I can, Richard, because the issue of the ICC seems controversial even with the current president, President Marcos, and he said in his statement, "We didn't help the ICC in any way. The arrest was made in compliance with Interpol." They're trying to avoid the name ICC in the statements from the government, are they not?
Yes, this is a sticky issue, and if you really frame it within the issue of sovereignty, people are touchy when they say that, there is a foreign court that's coming in to try us, that's coming in, and they're white. At one point, Duterte was trying to paint this as an issue of race even. So for Filipinos who have an issue already as to the West Philippine Sea, where sovereignty clearly and visually is a matter at hand, when you rile them up on the issue of sovereignty and another country, wrongly painted, another country coming in and trying to try a Filipino, we become so touchy. And I think the Marcos administration is trying to avoid entirely the issue of the ICC. And we've seen that even during legislative investigations. They're trying to avoid it, but at the same time supports it. So this is a political matter, but
it's a political matter. Richard, I mean, Duterte still has a great deal of support, does he not, in the Philippines? He has his daughter, although she's facing impeachment, as the vice president. Are there going to be problems down the line politically as a result of this in the Philippines?
Well, absolutely. The implications domestically are very clear. As we speak, the Philippine Senate has been dragging its feet on conducting a trial of the potentially, there has been an impeachment of Sara Duterte, the vice president, by the Congress already. So we have been waiting for the Senate to conduct a trial on that. But because many senators are fearing electoral and political backlash from the Duterte base, especially in Mindanao and the Visayan-speaking regions of the country, a lot of the senators have been wishy-washy and been dragging their foot, including the Senate President in the Philippines. So this is important because while I completely agree that the Marcos administration has been all over the place in terms of explaining what on earth is happening here, because I think they're struggling to square the circle, right? You cannot go on and say, you do not accept the jurisdiction of ICC. You cannot go on and say, I don't want war with the Dutertes and I don't want to be involved in this. And the next thing you know, you whisk him away of the country, right? But I think the implicit message here to those senators or anyone who has been doubting Marcos Jr. is that he now means business. As you know very well, since last year, the Dutertes have been openly questioning Marcos Jr.'s legitimacy. They have been even threatening him. I mean, no less than the vice president. One of the reasons why she could face conviction and removal is that she threatened to even assassinate President Marcos Jr. So I think Marcos Jr., while conflict avoidant, has realized that the moment of truth has come, and this is an existential crisis. So much will also, could happen in the coming days and months when it comes to the Sara impeachment issue, not to mention other potential criminal cases filed against other members of the Duterte family. Okay. The son, Sebastian, is the main...
Let me bring in Luis on this, because I need to look at the international repercussions of this. Is this in any way concerning for the ICC, which is a somewhat troubled organisation right now, I think you'll agree, even if the merits of the case are there, that perhaps it's being used in the Philippines for domestic political reasons?
I don't think the ICC is in trouble. It's in trouble. The world is in trouble. If we ignore the law, the world is in trouble. ICC was very consistent. Investigated Putin, American senators were happy. Investigated President Netanyahu, American senators were unhappy. South Africa was happy. Now investigate Duterte. And Duterte is also now arrested. So I think it's consistent. Political leaders are not consistent, but it's normal. So when you talk about what's happening now in Philippines will be a big political debate about Duterte, a big political debate about how to control drug dealers. But at The Hague will be a legal debate about the evidence and the law. So there are many debates. And your job as an international commentator will be complicated to show all these dimensions, including the connection with the ICC and other cases. But right now, the judges are focused on Duterte, evidence, law, that is ICC. The other political debate will be in the Philippines.
Luis, though, the problem, I think, Duterte, as we know, was sometimes called the Trump of Asia. The problem is the Trump himself, Donald Trump. As you know from being the first prosecutor of the ICC, the US, perhaps politically, has been the Rome Statute and the ICC's biggest problem since you started the job. How does the ICC continue to operate in these circumstances where, for example, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, as we speak, is visiting Hungary, we think the man who's going to be the new Chancellor of Germany, another key supporter in the past of the ICC, says that Netanyahu can now come to Germany?
Well, I have many doubts. Because if you remember, South Africa invited President Bashir to go to South Africa for an international conference. But then Bashir had to escape from South Africa because a judge in South Africa ordered his arrest. And exactly the same will happen in Germany with Netanyahu if he goes there. I don't think Netanyahu will go to Germany. Maybe Hungary is different, but not Germany. So that's the world today. We are trying to build a system when the law is respected to protect people in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Philippines. Those people from Philippines need protection. And for me, the idea is the ICC is a piece of the justice effort in Philippines. It's a part of Philippine effort.
Kristina, the debates around the world, very quickly, Richard, yeah.
Yeah, may I add something? I think there's another geopolitical dimension here. The Philippines has been at the forefront of leveraging international law to protect its sovereign rights in the South China Sea vis-a-vis China. And one of the arguments we have been making to press the government to come clean on this is this. You cannot go and say we need UNCLOS and international law when it comes to protection of the Philippines' rights vis-a-vis China, and then suddenly when it comes to ICC, I want to opt out of international law. So
okay, thank you, Richard, for that point. I want to bring in Kristina briefly at the end because we're talking about international law or whatever, and I don't want to forget the victims and the families there in the Philippines. What's been the reaction from your clients?
It's been a mix of emotions. For many, as we've mentioned, this has been a pleasant surprise. For many, it's been a ridiculous gift. And now that the emotions have died down, or at least tempered a little, we're looking at the huge work ahead for conviction. Because initially, we've had a few mothers come forward to file these cases, we're looking at thousands of others joining us during trial. So hopefully we'll be inviting a lot of more people in, and especially that we're looking at other acts. Aside from murder, hopefully more will have their chips in, and that during the elections, we become more aware of what really happened and how we can make people accountable.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all our guests today, Luis Moreno Ocampo, Kristina Conti and Richard Haidarian. If you missed any part of our conversation, no problem. You can always watch the programme again anytime on our website, aljazeera.com. We want to hear your thoughts too. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Alternatively, find us on X. We're at AJ Inside Story. From me, James Bays, and the team here in Doha, stay safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.